is mine, is still mine. It's called the Good Hope Bar. If you have lots of good hope and you want to work hard, go up there some Sunday. And mine and Burgess Smith's old place. An experience of my own is first-hand evidence of this early gold mining in the San Gabriel Canyon. I don't believe I've previously told this story to you, but it is not only documented, I lived it. It was in the summer of 1899. I was staying at Fowler's Camp, a resort in the San Gabriel Canyon, which belonged to my family. My grandfather, William Tecumseh Heaton, my grandmother, who was known as Pipe Smoking Annie, were at their cabin in the East Fork. Their son later became famous as my Uncle Ben. Some of you remember him. But I should give you a brief background better to understand this item. For a long period, previous to the turn of the century, there lived in the San Gabriel Canyon 3 mysterious Indians. They lived alone, each in his own cabin, and they seemed to get along as well as any of the other miners in the canyon. They never suffered for food or clothing. They didn't talk to anybody, but that's not unusual for Indians. They didn't apparently commune with each other. The oldest of these Indians was Louis Sena. Louis Sena lived in the East Fork of the San Gabriel Canyon, right near Peachtree Flat, where my grandfather lived. The second one, it was Don Felipe. He lived up in the Cattle Canyon, just where Coldwater Canyon enters in. And the younger, although quite old, nobody can guess an Indian's age anyhow, but he seemed to be quite old, but he was the younger of the group. He lived in Minero Gulch, which was opposite the McNabb holdings in the San Gabriel Canyon. Strangely, each of these cabins where lived one of these Indians was opposite and in good-looking position on the earliest mines in the canyon. One winter, Louis Sena was very ill with pneumonia. He credited my grandfather and my Uncle Ben with actually saving his life. They went across the river and took him the rude medicines that they had and hot food to eat, and he recovered. He was very, very grateful. And he told my grandfather that one day he would be repaid with much gold. And my grandfather thought this was nice talk, but he was a miner, a gold miner, and he'd heard lots of talk, because gold miners are talkers, liars by definition. A gold miner, if he's taking out lots of gold, he'll swear to God that he's not getting anything at all because he doesn't want to start a gold rush in that particular region. But if he isn't getting any gold, he'll tell you just as vehemently that he is getting it and getting lots of it, because he doesn't want you to think he's a fool to work that hard for nothing. So, Grandfather took the story at its face value, but shortly thereafter, old Louis Sena appeared at the cabin in the middle of a dark night and told them, "Get 2 days' grub and follow me." Well, they had nothing to lose, and so my Uncle Ben and my grandfather did as they were told and went with the Indian. They went up the East Fork of the San Gabriel Canyon about 6 miles. They got to where the Narrows Trail starts at the Saunders Mine. Mark Allen will know what I'm talking about because he's working up there every day. Right where the Narrows starts. Then the Indian took off over the shale slide, and they followed him with some difficulty, and he took them into the entrance of the Iron Fork. And this is rough country at any time, and it was rougher in those days. They went over a meadow. Instead of dropping down into the Iron Fork where the present trail goes, they went over a meadow off towards the south that led to the headwaters of Devil's Canyon. in the game refuge. At Devil's Canyon, they keyed off again over what looked like a meadow. That is to say, there were no big trees on it, and the brush was low, scrubby. Grandfather noted that the ground was quartz entirely, which would account for the change in the plants that grew there. And they found that they were walking along a trail that had been worn into the rock by constant use. And my grandfather had been here many years at that time, and he knew there had been no trail through there, and nobody had used that. But they were on a trail, and they soon came to an old Indian village. Mounds, shards, artifacts, stone hammers and axes and all that sort of thing, all around. Then my grandfather says he began to believe there was something to this story, and he followed more intently. And they came to an enormous cliff that raised straight out of this meadow right up into the air, off Devil's Canyon, off Iron Fork. And of a sudden, just as dawn came, they saw standing on that cliff on the horizon, silhouetted against the blue, an Indian with his hands straight up, an Indian they had never seen. And he made this motion. Louis Center, without a word to my grandfather and my uncle, turned and in a dignified but very severe manner walked back on the trail, taking a shorter route than he'd taken to get there. My uncle and my grandfather followed him down, seeing nothing else to do. I know in my heart that Indian was one of the guards, one in another canyon that we didn't know, joining these three whom I've spoken of, Don Felipe, Jose Maria, and Luis Sena. And he was in his place guarding, and he wasn't going to let anybody come in, not even another Indian. My grandfather respected the Indians in many ways for their medicine and their weather knowledge and the way they could live on little of nothing. And when this Indian, Louis Sena, told him that he was not to go back up to that mine, my grandfather never went. But my Uncle Ben was a little more intrepid. He and I went on 2 different occasions and searched our hearts out, and we couldn't find this particular place, showing that the trail that he took to get there was a pretty well hidden and well-covered trail. Later, with high school friends of mine, I went up in there and got lost, like all people do when they get into the mountains that are a little too much for them. And I have some frightening memories of that particular area. I don't advise anybody to go in. Maybe the demon that devours those who search for gold is waiting for you up there. I don't know. But I do know in my heart that up there is one of those old mines, and in that mine there is much gold. Bill Potter's stories weren't always just the kind that his granddaughter might have appreciated. He was known in the canyon as Lion Bill Potter, because he could tell them and enjoyed telling them. Well, he's like my Uncle Ben. He always felt that a story should lose nothing in the telling. So, old Bill Potter was going down the canyon one day on his trusty burro, and he met Governor Waterman, who's governor of the state of California in the 80s, coming down from a fishing trip, or going up to go fishing, excuse me. And so the governor said to some of his associates, "Come on now, we'll have some fun, just back me up." So he said to Bill, "Where are you going in such a hurry, Bill?" Oh, Bill says, "Boy, I got to get to town. The old lady's sick unto death there, and I've got to get to town, get a doctor, and get back. Don't hold me up now at all." He went on. So the governor felt a little ashamed of himself for being facetious at such a time. But when he got up to the Potter place, there was the old lady out chopping wood, hale and hearty as she ever was. So Lion Bill had lived up to his reputation.